Anthony Albanese says Australians will still vote for big ideas, but the economy has to be the focus for anyone seeking to win government. He has delivered his second vision statement in Brisbane a short time ago. Let's go live now to political reporter Trudy McIntosh in Canberra. And Trudy, the focus today on productivity.
It certainly was, Tom. This is the second vision speech that we've seen from Anthony Albanese. The first one back in Perth, that focused on jobs, and this time instead focused in on the economy. And as you say, the main takeaway from this speech from Anthony Albanese is he wants a so-called productivity renewal project, which is looking at things like infrastructure, but also cutting red tape and boosting more money into things like skills packages. Let's have a listen to his comments.
If we are to make the most of our natural endowments and geographical position, Australia has to engage in a productivity renewal project. Productivity is the key to economic growth, international competitiveness and ultimately rising living standards, underpinned in large part by long-term sustainable wage growth.
The Labor leader choosing Brisbane as the backdrop for this economic speech, and we know that Queensland is such a crucial state when it comes to deciding elections. Labor went backwards in that state under Bill Shorten in 2016, and Anthony Albanese makes it pretty clear in this speech that he's want to focus on Queensland. It's talking up the opportunities in that state. It was interesting earlier in the day to hear from the Home Affairs Minister. He was asked whether he considers Anthony Albanese to be a bigger threat electorally in that state compared to Bill Shorten.
I think Anthony Albanese is a bigger threat than Bill Shorten, and a bigger threat, frankly, than even Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard. Now, every Labor leader says that they aren't going to tax and spend, but they always say it when they're in opposition. And when they get into government, they tax and spend. And so at the last election, Mr Albanese was a senior figure in the Shorten opposition who had ticked off on jacking up taxes for all Australians.
Trudy, we also heard from Peter Dutton calling on Anthony Albanese to repudiate Paul Keating's criticism of security agencies. I probably wouldn't be holding my breath if I were him.
No, Peter Dutton doing his best though anyway, Tom. He's really taken aim at the former Prime Minister Paul Keating. You recall on Monday, Mr Keating was delivering this big speech at the Australian Security Forum focused in on China. In that wide-ranging speech, he took particular aim at the security agencies of the nation, saying that in many cases they have a particular phobia when it comes to China. That the Home Affairs Minister says those comments are not appropriate, defending what he's heard from his security agencies.
I wouldn't characterise the law enforcement agencies or our intelligence agencies in the way that Paul Keating has. I think he's done a disservice to the professionalism of our agencies, and for him to denigrate them in such a way, I think, frankly, Mr Albanese should condemn those comments, and I think they reflect more on Mr Keating than they do on any of our agency heads.
But Labor sources tell me, Tom, you wouldn't be expecting to hear Mr Albanese condemn these comments from Paul Keating anytime soon. But just before I go, interesting to note these comments we've seen from the former ASIO boss Duncan Lewis today, really zeroing in on the threat of foreign interference from China. During his time as ASIO boss, he didn't really call out China by name, only referring in the broad to these threats from overseas. Interesting today to see he really went quite hard, calling it an insidious threat to the nation.